And I think you've set the scene very, very nicely for our colleague Jean-François, who is going to now take us through his story of the forces behind building strong relationships with customers. Customers who are also the people that, Chris, you have just talked about. So, Jean-François, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Chris. So yes, I will walk you through our framework, the forces of customer experience, and how it can be used. But before I do so, I think it's important to put things into context. Right now, health and safety is clearly a big priority for businesses. Organizations are investing heavily to deliver experiences to customers that are in line with health and safety guidelines. And our data also shows that health and safety is very important for customers. I could show you some hard numbers, but I think the quote that Chris showed from that lady in the US that says that she doesn't really want to go back to the restaurant because she was uneasy with the appearance of the gloves, I think sums it all up. Health and safety is hugely important. It's almost a hygiene factor. But at the same time, as we start thinking about building a new customer experience vision, creating the experience of the future, we really need to have a broader understanding of customers' functional but also relational needs in order to drive these strong relationships. And actually staying close to customers and truly addressing their needs in these challenging times is really expected to drive a certain amount of goodwill amongst customers and some form of emotional attachment. So our data shows that emotional attachment is really key to drive stronger relationships and higher customer lifetime values. On the left-hand side here, you can see a simple way to segment customers according to their level of relationship strengths with organizations. We have three groups. Customers that are unfulfilled, they are fundamentally dissatisfied with an organization offering. We then have customers that are functionally satisfied. They feel the organization is delivering well on the basics, but they have not really formed any sort of special bond with that organization. And finally, towards the higher end of relationship strengths, we have customers that are emotionally attached. They are not only functionally satisfied, but they've also created and formed a special affinity or bond with the organization. And on the right-hand side, we are showing traditional customer experience KPIs, such as preference, NPS, which stands for Net Promoter Score, which is a proxy for advocacy, and likelihood to continue, which is a proxy for retention. And you can see if you compare the score for the three groups that there are some benefits associated to recreating that functional satisfaction, to moving people from being unfulfilled to functionally satisfied. But there are huge gains to be had by driving customers toward that higher level of relationship strength, towards that sort of emotional attachment state. So when customers are emotionally attached, they're far more likely to prefer the brand, they're far more likely to become advocates, and far more likely to continue with the brand. And these sort of behaviors have got a direct impact on revenue. So emotional attachment is a worthy goal, but what we really wanted to find out was whether we could provide some guidance to organizations in terms of understanding how to optimize the experiences that they deliver to drive these strong relationships. So we carried out some R&D across several regions, and in collaboration with our global behavioral science team, we created a framework for customer experience, which is called the Forces of CX, which is designed to provide that guidance to drive stronger relationships. And these dimensions that you can see here have been validated to be strong predictors of relationship strengths. So these dimensions are fair treatment, certainty, control, status, belonging, and enjoyment. So I won't go through all of them, but I want to just mention a few of them, and also they're relevant to the current situation. So fair treatment. All the research that we've done in the past shows that fair treatment is hugely important when it comes to building strong relationships. Fundamentally, if an organization's value proposition or service handling is unfair, customers simply won't engage further. It's of course very important for organizations right now not to be seen to be profiting unfairly from the situation. So we've seen some great initiatives. So for example, some car insurance providers have given a rebate to customers as they can't drive currently as often as they could before. And that's a way to drive that sort of perception of fair treatment. The second one that I want to mention is certainty. Customer choice at all times involves some degree of uncertainty, but that's particularly true in challenging times. So here the challenge for brands is to provide that reassurance, to provide very sort of clear communications around how the service will be delivered, to try and mitigate some of these feelings of uncertainty. Belonging, I want to mention as well because I think it's fascinating. We found in our research that when customers feel that they share the same values as the organization they deal with, and when the values are really delivered on the ground through the customer experience, they are far more likely to engage in truly meaningful and long-lasting relationships. And the last one I want to mention is enjoyment. Chris also mentioned indulgence, and we think it's important even in challenging times. And enjoyment is interesting because it can take different shapes depending on the sector. Sometimes it's about the pleasure of the experience itself. So if we think about restaurants or possibly hotels, but in quite a lot of other cases in sectors such as insurance or banking, it's really about providing products or services that make customers' life easier, that removes the hassle so they can feel a sense of freedom. So these are the dimensions that we are that predict, if you want, the strengths of relationships. But as part of our R&D, we also wanted to make the model very actionable. So we were able to identify some questions or statements that we can include in surveys so that organizations can measure how they perform against the competition and create action plans accordingly. So I want to finish by showing you some actual data from the R&D we collected in UK, but also in Latin America. And one thing I get asked very often is whether the forces of customer experience are relevant to different geographies and different cultures. And the answer is yes, they are relevant, and they apply because they are fundamentally based on human needs and motivations. But whilst they apply, the interesting part is that it's the hierarchy of importance that can vary significantly depending on cultures and regions. On the left, whilst you can see that for the UK, fair treatment and status come up as most important. For Brazil, belonging really stands out. So of course, we talked to our Latin American colleagues, and to get some interpretation. And of course, Brazil is a country where there are significant socio-economic differences, and still a huge proportion of customers who do not really have access to services. And that means that the role that brands can play in working for the greater good is crucial, and that can explain why belonging is standing out for Brazil. But if you look at Chile, that's quite interesting because it shows that not all Latin American countries are the same. They don't behave in the same way. Chile is a different country in the sense that norms and structures are very well established, and being serious and trustworthy are important personal characteristics. And as a result, we see certainty coming out more strongly. So beyond cultural differences, of course, we also see that the relative importance of the forces can vary significantly depending on the sector, and even for different brands within a given sector. So it's important for companies and brands to work out which forces are most important for their customers, and to try and create action plans accordingly. So to wrap up, I would say that the forces of CX is a framework that's grounded in behavioral science that helps organizations optimize their customer journeys so that they drive the right response, the right impact on these important forces, which in turn can drive stronger relationship strengths, which lead to increased customer outcomes such as retention, advocacy, share of spend, or operational efficiencies. These are the customer outcomes that all businesses try to drive. And in turn, these increased outcomes lead to what we call a better ROCE, a better return on customer experience investment. So that was a quick tour of our model. Thank you very much.
That was great, Jean-François. Thanks a lot. And I guess I found it very interesting to see those differences across the different markets that you were showing there. And so it's clear that there are differences, but you were also pointing out the fact that some of these forces seem to be particularly relevant in these times. So could you tell us a little bit more about that? And is there one in particular that we should be mindful of?
Yeah, I would say that certainty relates to security. So as we said, from the beginning of the webinar, it is becoming more important and really has more sort of weight now. The only one, if I may, Jennifer, that I would like to mention is belonging. I think there is no, at this time, it's very important for brands to try and really express and deliver on their promises and their purpose. So I think that's also one that I would like to mention.
Great, thanks a lot for that.